Earlier this week, the Australian Greens proposed the Tycoon Tax, which is the tax on the mega corporations that make super profits in Australia. These corporations currently pay little or no company tax year on year despite benefiting from various government incentives. In this video, I'm going to talk about 5 reasons why we need the Tycoon Tax. But first, let's look at a project clip about it.
The Greens are putting Jerry Harvey, Gina Rinehart, Clive Palmer on notice that it's people who run this country, not the billionaire corporations.
It's got a brand new name.
A tycoon tax.
But a familiar sound.
Profits-based tax.
Profits-based tax.
Tax when you're earning super profits.
Record profits.
But this time, it's not just mining companies on notice. Any company that turns over more than $100 million in profits and returns more than 6% to shareholders will cop an extra 40% super profits tax on excess profit.
Australia already collects considerably more company tax than almost any other country in the OECD.
It's estimated to raise around $338 billion in revenue over 10 years.
We could afford to get dental into Medicare, mental health into Medicare, and build affordable housing so that everyone's got a roof over their head.
Okay, so it's super simple. The tax is for Australian mega corporations that have super profits. The tax will bring in around $340 billion from mega corporations, many of which got massive support payments like JobKeeper and super cheap government supported loans. So the number one reason why we need this Tycoon Tax is to invest in Australians by expanding Medicare, building affordable housing, and creating clean jobs. We need to expand Medicare to cover a lot more services, and this tax would do that. Right now, if you need to see a dentist or have teeth pulled out, it's considered a cosmetic treatment. Similarly, if you need mental health support, it is very difficult to get publicly funded help. This means that people who can't afford thousands of dollars for medical treatment let it fester, and the situation gets worse still. There are services that Australians need right now, and this very non-controversial tax could help fund it. The Grattan Institute looked at the cost of doing all of this, and it's about $60 billion over 10 years. Compare that to the $340 billion that it would bring in. We saw during this pandemic that the cost of housing went skyrocketing up. The main reason for this is that we have a tremendous amount of housing insecurity in Australia. Anyone who can afford it will do whatever it takes to buy a house. We can make a massive dent on this by building social housing and refurbishing existing ones. In 2008, we built 30,000 units and refurbished 90,000, and it cost about $15 billion. Finally, we can lead the charge on adapting our economy for global warming. For example, currently there is a project being considered in the Northern Territory called the Sun Cable. A bunch of Australian billionaires want to build solar farms and a battery 150 times the biggest one in Australia right now to provide almost all of the electricity that Singapore needs. Instead of letting these billionaires own these kinds of infrastructure, we as the Australian people can build and own these projects. Australians right now pay some of the highest prices for electricity in the world. That's because a massive portion of what we are paying for is profits to various foreign-owned mega corporations. See, with the remaining amount of revenue from the tax, we could build 10 such massive projects, turning Australia into a clean energy powerhouse. Besides investing in Australians, the number 2 reason is we would finally get paid for the minerals we own. One of the core parts of this tax is making sure that major mining corporations in Australia pay for the minerals they sell. Right now, there is no current federal tax on minerals, which means that these various mining corporations basically get these minerals, which are owned by the Australian people, for free. There are some small royalties that some state governments get, but this would finally make sure that we at least put a price on the minerals that we own. Which brings us to the number 3 reason, which is these mega corporations will finally have to pay some tax. Let's look at some of the massively profitable companies that pay $0 in federal company taxes year in, year out. In Australia, our biggest companies don't pay taxes, which also means that the richest people in Australia who make their wealth by owning stocks in these companies also don't pay any taxes. Take for example Clive Palmer, who regularly avoids paying income taxes, going almost 6 years at a time without paying a cent. Some of the biggest mining companies are super profitable and yet pay nothing in taxes year upon year. BlueScope Steel made $6.5 billion, paid nothing in 2018-2019. ExxonMobil made $13 billion, paid nothing. Hope Downs, owned by the richest woman in Australia, Gina Rinehart. They made $3.8 billion, they paid nothing. But it's not just mining companies. There are companies in almost every industry which frequently pay nothing in taxes. Atlassian, the giant software company owned by Mike Cannon-Brookes, made $1.5 billion and paid nothing in 2017-2018. In 2019, Vodafone made $3.6 billion, Transurban made almost $2.5 billion, Virgin Australia made $6 billion. All of these companies paid nothing in taxes. A big part of why we need this tax is to make sure that these mega corporations owned by these billionaires finally pay something, anything. The 4th reason why we need this tax is it will make smaller companies win. The thing is, most Australian companies do actually pay taxes. As Sol Islek was saying in that project clip, most Australian companies do pay taxes. ATO looked at about 2350 companies and about 2/3 paid taxes. Almost all of those that paid taxes also paid close to the standard 30% tax rate. But when these mega corporations who don't pay anything year upon year upon year, it makes it much harder for these tax-paying companies to compete. Basically, this tax will help smaller companies and make the deadbeats pay. There's one final reason why this is a tax we need, and it's in the way that it works. Mom and pop investors don't pay this tax. Obviously, employees don't have to pay these taxes because they're on the super profits of the company, which are paid for by investors. But the way that the tax system works in Australia is that when a company pays taxes and also pays out dividends to its investors, those investors can claim it back as franking credits. People who actually pay income taxes don't get affected by this tax at all. They just claim it all back. Also, pensioners and retirees who get these dividends don't have to pay any of these taxes. They'll get to claim it back as well. It's a tax designed to make sure billionaires who make most of their money by owning the company get taxed. It's pretty damn obvious that this tax would go a long way to fix some of the dire problems facing Australia. It would let us fund crucial services like Medicare, build affordable housing, and invest in our infrastructure. It would mean we finally get paid for the minerals we own. It would make the mega corporations finally pay some taxes and even the playing field for the small businesses in Australia. And it wouldn't hurt any of the small-time retirees or income tax-paying investors. So why haven't we done this already? This wasn't initially an Australian Greens policy. This was a Labor Party policy under Kevin Rudd. It's just that Australia has continued to swing so far to the right that the Greens are the only ones still talking about this stuff anymore. The current Liberal government has no plans to make sure tax avoiding megacorps pay anything, and the Labour Party has not yet released any plans whatsoever. If you think it is a responsible thing to fund healthcare and infrastructure and protect small businesses, then you should support the Tycoon Tax.